thought I might make a comment about setting the prop pitch, because that's what controls what RPM the engine goes. And since I was testing the engine and I found out it turns up 6,250 RPM static, that means the plane's tied down, it's not moving anywhere. That's exactly what I want. That's exactly the number I want. Now on takeoff it might go a little higher than that. It might go 6,500. It's because the air tends to go through the prop and that kind of unloads it a little bit, and then it'll turn up a little higher on climb out. But 6,250 is excellent. That'll give me good fuel economy there. So what I do to change the prop pitch, if I wanted to modify it, I do it using levels. This is a level thing for setting the prop. There's a little bubble level in there, and it clamps onto the propeller blade at an angle. You put that on the back side here on the flat part of the blade, and then you set this dial. You can turn in there until you get that bubble reading right, and then there's a scale on here. On both sides you got a scale, and it tells you that that prop is set at 20 degrees. That's the pitch of that prop. But that only works if it's set in level where it is now, or at least in the same spot every time. So whenever you set this, you get this reading on here, you'd have to have it, make sure it's set in level. Now, you could use a bubble level like this, and I could set this on here and I find out, hey, that darn body tube is just about dead nuts level. So that's just something you could know if you were fiddling with this thing. But the way you do it to measure each blade to set them and get them consistent, you got to have a level and set it on the leading edge of the blade and set it on there so that that bubble is dead nuts level, that blade, that edge. So you're checking it in the same spot every time, because if this moves up and down a little bit, it could change this reading in here, although you do have to move it pretty far before you see that bubble move in there. So make sure you got the prop level when you check it. And it's set by loosening the screws here. You have to take this spinner off, loosen the screws inside, and then I usually twist the blade by putting a little tension on it, and then I wrap it with maybe a screwdriver handle, something to vibrate it a little bit, and just tap that edge as you put tension on it, and you'll be able to move it in very small increments just by tapping on it. Or sometimes I use the wood handle of the hammer, just the handle I tap it with, to get it to move a small amount. And then you turn around and do the other end, you get them both the same. But in this case, I don't want to change the pitch. I'm going to leave that just where it is, because I think that's set pretty good right there. So you more or less are setting the pitch of the prop to match the amount of power you have from the engine. If I had a 3-blade prop on there, it would run quieter, but it would have a little less pitch in it. It wouldn't have 20 degrees like this says. It would have less than that, because you've got 3 blades, and therefore there's less pitch, and less pitch means quieter prop. The other thing I wanted to show you, I was talking about the prop adjustment of the pitch on the propeller. You also have to keep in mind that if you change anything on the plane, like there's a certain amount of certain thrust angle on this plane in order to get it to fly straight. These spacers here on the back of these motor mounts, these are just Lord mounts on here, but these spacers, you'll notice I got a green dot there and a green dot up here. And of course there's only 2 of those on this end of the engine, but on this end there are 4. And they're a different length back here. They're a little bit longer back here than these. So the thrust angle on this is up just a little bit. And that would, if you changed that, that would maybe change your dimension on your pitch angle of the prop, which is used just to determine where you're at, so when you adjust it, you'll know which way to go when you're setting it and how much you went. You need to know that. If it's parked on level ground and everything's level the way it is now. So only thing that counts is what it measured when you started out. So always when you set the pitch, you want to make sure you know what the angle is to start with, and then you know if you're adding or subtracting. But you got to know where you're at, or you really don't know what you're doing fooling with that prop. And you have to take this spinner off right here with this bolt. Now there's Loctite on it because I don't want anything coming loose, so there is Loctite on the bolt, but it'll unscrew out of there. And then you'll have to loosen the bolts. You can see them here on the back. Loosen those prop bolts a little bit so that you can unclamp it to adjust it here. Other than that, I'll tell you, somebody asked me about why I don't have any pressure in the cooling system. The main reason is this is a gray head engine, and the gray head engines had a different kind of seal for the water pump. The water pump impeller's on the other side, but you have this little bottle here for rotary valve oil, they call it, and it's all it does is fill up the center of the crankshaft with oil, and that's where the little skew gear that runs that shaft that turns a water pump on the far side and the rotary valve on this side. There's oil lubrication for them all the time on there. So then they say, well, how do you know those inner seals aren't leaking? Well, if they were leaking, this oil would go down in this oil bottle real fast if they were leaking. And chances are if they were going to leak, it's going to do it when it's shut off, because there's quite a bit of head pressure on that oil in that box. So, you know, just from the height of where this is mounted. So I know that the center seals don't leak at all. But the main reason there's no pressure in the cooling system is that because it uses just a lip seal, which is, well, you see them on a lot of electric motors and everything else. This has lip seals here, and there'd be lip seal here. They're not designed for pressure. So you don't want to put 14 psi or 17 or whatever these Rotaxes use. They got little tiny radiators so they can run them real hot. That's what they're trying to do, get away with small radiators. But on this plane, I don't have a small radiator. I have a giant radiator right here. So I don't need to run pressure, and if I don't have pressure, the seals won't leak. If you have a water pump seal leaking, it's going to leak water, and the coolant's going to get into this oil. So if you stick your finger in this oil, or you can even see in the bottle, if it starts looking milky in there, then your coolant is getting into your oil. Those seals are leaking. And you would need another lip seal in there. Rotax had a problem with that with these gray head engines, and they reduced the size of the shaft it's in. Now this one's had that done. This has a smaller shaft. That's to reduce the surface speed on that lip seal by going to a smaller diameter shaft, and that gives you less surface feet per minute on the spinning of the shaft, and the rubber won't cut into the seal. Or the seal won't cut into the shaft, I should say. The shaft is heat treated, but rubber will cut steel, and it'll put a big groove in those shafts for the water pump. So in order to eliminate any pressure on there, which is of course what's forcing that rubber to cut that steel, I don't run any coolant pressure in there at all, and I've never had any trouble with it in all the years I've had it. Just by doing that. But I've always run it without pressure. It's never had any pressure in there. Now the guy I got the engine from, he used pressure in there. He had pressure because he had the Rotax cooling system. But right away I could see where that was no good, and so I changed to this no pressure system on it.